Greetings, travelers! Welcome back to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your animal companions, Fox and Sparrow.
Hello and happy February, I guess. We're midway through February, and I was gonna say happy Valentine's Day, but I realized when this episode comes out, it's like way past Valentine's Day. So, happy Black History Month, I guess.
I think historically we've always done like a lovers episode or some kind of romantic one.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are craving some love still, you can go and check those out, but we will not really be doing that for this episode.
We love love, but we also love variety.
Yes, and we have tons of lovers ones. So if you're interested in anything from Persian folklore, African, we have, I think there's one from Japan. There's tons of stuff to look at, so do go onto the website or onto just our catalog. What do you call podcast episodes?
You can go through our episode list. You can also check out our website where we'll have posts. Maybe we can include a couple of those episodes listed at the top of this week's show notes, like kind of like if they want some alts. But there's a number of them in there if you kind of go looking. There's a lot of good love stories in these fairy tales. Okay, so this month, as I think we've mentioned before, is my birthday month. So my birthday has come and gone. And as kind of my birthday gift to myself, I got myself like a new game. Because let's be real, pretty much all I do is play video games, is what I'm learning when I do all these updates of what I'm into, is I'm always just playing a new game.
Yeah, I feel the same. Whenever we talk on these, I'm just like, here's a game we're playing, or here's a book we're reading, or here's a show we're watching, and I'm like, we should maybe go outside.
Nah. Well, you talked about skiing. I went skating this weekend. That was an outdoor thing.
Ooh.
I haven't skated since I was a child, so that was really interesting. I really was afraid I was gonna fall, and then I didn't. It's really an exciting story.
Did your school not do those like skating weeks where there were just like old skates and donated skates just in the hallways, and then you went and got size, and then we went skating every afternoon?
No, my parents taught me how to skate.
Oh.
Like we had a rink somewhat nearby. So we went once in a while, but like not often. Like no one was really big into it in my family. So it was like something to learn how to do.
Oh, no one taught you at school. They gave you skates and told you to get on the ice. That was it.
Here's blades. Have fun, kids.
No, literally, that's exactly what it was. I think the rich kids went skiing because the skiing holidays at my school, they were like thousands of dollars to go.
Oof.
Actually, I think in my mind it was thousands of dollars, but I'm not quite sure exactly how much it was. It could have been like 500 or something. But to me, as a child, that was like thousands of dollars.
It's a lot.
But I know some kids went skiing and then the rest of us went skating. But I mean, I don't think there were any lessons for the skiing kids either. It was just very much like, can you ski? Great, you're allowed to come on this trip. Can you not ski?
Dang.
Go down the mountain anyway. If you can pay for the skis and stuff, then here you go. Straight down.
Have fun. Try not to die.
But at least your parents taught you and they didn't just throw you onto the ice.
Yeah, no, my dad was very much into teaching us these types of things. He was
That's
really
good.
into like hockey as a kid. You know, very classic Canadian, right?
Yes.
Anyways, so I need to do more of that stuff. I did it once this weekend, and then I immediately came home and played the game I got myself for my birthday, which was a game called SteamWorld Build. And so SteamWorld Build is like an addition into the SteamWorld series. If you've never played these games, they're all these indie games, so you can get them for like relatively decent prices because they're indie and they're great. But like pretty much every time the studio comes out with another SteamWorld game, they pretty much create a new, like a completely different type of game. So like the first two games in the series were SteamWorld Dig and SteamWorld Dig 2, and those were like Metroidvania games. So like side scroller type deals. And then the next game they came out with was like SteamWorld Heist, which was this side-scrolling shooter game, which was like completely different mechanics, which was like more of like a chess game, honestly. It was like all this tactical stuff. And then the next game they came out with was SteamWorld Quest, which was a deck building game.
That's completely different.
But they all have like the same type of humor in it, which is really just like really cutesy humor, which I enjoy. And it's like, there's like a greater overall narrative of the world. Like we'll follow one or two characters for each game, but then they just go off and do their thing, and the next game will have a whole new cast of characters. But like there is a bigger overall lore that's happening in the world at large, which is very interesting, which is fun to see. So SteamWorld Build is like a Sim City game, so completely different from everything else. It was a lot of fun, but it's also super short. Yeah, just a really cute game. I highly recommend those games if people are looking for just like small bite size, especially SteamWorld Dig 2. That one was like the best in terms of like gameplay and story. It was very fun. I won't go into it more because I don't want to take up too much time geeking out on these games.
Oh yeah. We do end up taking too much time explaining what we're doing.
In the interest of keeping things on track, I'm going to leave it there. I could talk a long time about them, but it's very fun. Fox, what are you into these days?
I'm still very much into crafting. I have been doing my Legos. So I got the wildflower set, I think, for my birthday. No, for Christmas. And then I got the cactus succulent set for my birthday. And then Sparrow graciously has gifted me the orchid set. So now I have another Lego set. And it was very serendipitous because I had just finished my cactus one because I had left the last kind of like pot and flower for the very like towards the very end of the month, I had left it because I wanted to kind of spread it out for as long as possible because that one wasn't very long. And then the night I finished it, the next day in the morning, I got my orchid set. So I was like, yes, I have something else to build. And then I also have a book nook that I have to build. And those are one of those wooden ones that you have to just spend ages just taking the pieces out and then building them and gluing them. So that's next. And then I've also been doing, they have these lessons online called like geometric Islamic painting or like art. And it's all about math, but how you use like protractors and rulers and basically very precise measurements to make art. And so I've been doing a bit of that with watercolors and with pastel. So that's been fun. I messaged my husband and I was like, I never thought I would message you this, but do we own a compass? Like, you know, where you put your pen and then like you go around. And he said, yeah, I'm sure we have one like somewhere. And I was like, okay, because I had the protractor. I don't know what it's called, but you know the full protractor where it's just like a circle? I'm not sure if it's just a protractor. I don't know what it's called, but I had that. I had the triangular one. I had my rulers. I had my compass. Then I had like a paper with just like the different measurements I needed. Because when you follow along these tutorials, they have like the measurements you need to make each. So it has to be very, because it's symmetrical. You're supposed to give the illusion of symmetry. So you have to make every piece look the same. So it was a lot of drawing and then erasing and then remeasuring. And then, because if you get one thing wrong, it doesn't look 100% the same.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually I gave up and I drew grid lines. And then I did it that way because the instructor had said, you know, you could do the grid lines, but it takes ages to actually make the grid lines first and then do it. But I was like, no, I don't need to. And then
you need them.
Well, because it's so much easier to count things and make sure everything's precise. Because I feel like for the students who didn't really care if it was precise, they could just kind of do whatever. But I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Could have also gotten graph paper.
No, because it's on watercolor, like it's on the actual cardstock.
Oh, okay.
Like it's on actual, not canvas, but I have a watercolor book because you need to be the thick material because it has to be really good quality because you're erasing all the lines that you don't need at the end. And if you do that on graph paper or you do that on like regular paper, it just looks really messy. So we had to use proper art paper. So that was fun. I got to pull out my watercolor book that I bought last year and just haven't used. So yeah, I've just been doing crafty stuff and stuff with my hands.
That sounds really fun. I have never done that type of thing before. I'm not as like, I like some artsy stuff, but like the artsy stuff I like is like drama and like story writing. I've never been good at the physical crafting of things. I'm like, what's this? What's happening? Why is there glue everywhere?
I love all of it. I love just all forms of the arts. I'm going to start dabbling in music, but I think I'll wait till next month. I'll make physical art this year, and then I'll do the guitar and the piano next year, because we own both of those things. I just think of them as decor pieces.
It's really fun. I love this idea of like you'll just take on a different type of art every year. Be like, this is what I'm doing this year.
Well, why not? It's been rainy, it's been grim. Because I've been so sick, like I've just been chronically ill this entire year
Aw.
slash December. So I haven't been able to focus a lot on things. So I can't really be on my computer for too long, which makes work very difficult. But I use up all of like the strain of that, like when I'm working.
Hmm.
So when I'm not working, I try and do other things. And I found that reading is also a bit difficult because I can't really focus. So it might be long COVID. I don't know. But yeah, so it's been a bit of everything. So I've been really trying to just keep myself engaged with things with my hands and my body, to keep standing up, to keep doing things. So I'm not just, staring at a screen all day or staring at my phone. So I can just kind of give that stuff a rest.
Fair enough.
And in the interest of not staring at my computer for hours and hours, let's jump into the story here today. So there is a little bit of a disclaimer for this one because I know a lot of our listeners are not from Canada or the United States, but in Canada, the United States, and I think maybe the United Kingdom, I don't know. I don't think so, but we have different months that we celebrate different groups of people or different things or different illnesses. So we do have breast cancer awareness month. We have Indigenous Peoples Month. So we have specific months where we celebrate things basically. And I think it's becoming more international as we have social media. And since, the United States is such a big powerhouse where lots of companies and stuff are based, when they do these celebrations, it kind of goes over all of their social media platforms. And so it raises lots of awareness for these months. And specifically, February, we celebrate Black History Month with an emphasis on learning about the slave trade, the Underground Railroad, the civil rights movements. So we do a lot of that in school. And I think once you leave school, it does kind of die down. The amount of awareness we see besides social media and ads and stuff like that. But on this podcast, we do want to bring you a wide range of stories from all over the world. And while we have covered North American native tales, we have not really covered any African American stories. And these are more stories that are uniquely American because while they do take aspects of the slaves, their native countries where they came from, it becomes kind of a melting pot. So African American folklore and fairy tales are a unique branch of storytelling just resulting from the wide-ranging Black diaspora. From a diaspora myself, it just means that, people who've been taken away from their native country or they've moved away from their homeland and they've set up roots somewhere else. And so despite being rich in folklore, African American storytelling traditions were often ignored by scholars of the period. They didn't see it as worthwhile, as significant. They just saw it as stories people were telling that weren't of any significance. But one folklorist, John Bennett, wrote his collection based on protecting the oral storytelling of the coastal Black population, which he considered as the true heart and soul of South Carolina's literary tradition. So Bennett got this story from a local Black woman named Armanita Tucker, who said that it rained for 30 days before the mob grew angry and they confronted this doctor. And his tale was called The Apothecary and the Mermaid. That is our story for today, but we will also be mixing in another version titled The Mer-Woman Out of the Sea from Virginia Hamilton's Her Stories.
We just really love a good mermaid story on this podcast is what I'm seeing.
Oh, mermaids, selkies, anything underwater. People on Twitter, X as well, everyone goes crazy for a good mermaid tale. And I think that we can never have enough. I want to see mermaids. I want to see merfolk. I want to see selkies and seals and, sea creatures pulling people underwater.
I think it's because, we have not explored a lot of our oceans. So there's still some level of, maybe some of this could be true because we haven't explored the under the sea as much as we've explored, the land and stuff. When we talk about the glass mountain, we're like, psh, we know there's no glass mountain out there. We've checked, we've explored pretty much most of our landmass. We know there's none, but under the sea, there could be an ocean kingdom. We don't know. Anyways, that's just my theory.
No, I think it does come from not knowing, and that's why I think we have so many theories about what's in space and aliens, and that's a whole, I don't want to say storytelling culture because there is, I do think that there might be aliens. I think there might be more life out there, but I feel like we're so fascinated with things that we don't have explanations for. And so when you have a coastal town and it rains for 30 days and it feels like the sky is angry, it feels like nature is angry, you want to come up with an explanation as to why. And if we look back at some of the Native American stories we've told, that there are stories where you try and understand why nature is reacting by coming up with a conclusion to it, right? You say, this is why the gods are angry, or this is why the spirits are unhappy, or this is why our ancestors are unhappy. No matter which storytelling tradition you pick from, oftentimes big events come with some kind of disorder, some kind of natural disorder. And so here we see this story where this woman told this tale of how it rained for 30 days before everyone was so damp and cold and they could never get dry, that they grew angry and they looked for a reason why.
So, dear travelers, if it feels like it's been raining for 30 days straight where you are from, then join us as we dive into the tale of the Mer-Woman out of the sea.
On the 3rd of July, 1867, at about 10:30, an ominous black cloud appeared high in the sky and swelled like an angry giant. It covered everything before abruptly swirling down and settling over everyone. Then came the rain that created rivers over the roofs and down the chimneys, the lightning that streaked past the windows, and the thunder that cracked in the silence. As suddenly as it came, the wind died and everything was still except for the constant pattering of rain. Days passed and the endless floods turned every road into a marshland. Cockroaches emptied out of the kitchen walls and into the flood and onto the people. 4-5 weeks passed and everyone was constantly on edge with the feeling of dampness and the stench of rot. Everyone knew something was wrong. They had all heard this tale of something drenched in cold that had crawled out of the sea and made its way overland. The dark rumors were spread by wizened old women until one day a hysterical woman screamed out loud, "There's a Mer-Woman amongst us, a mermaid. The water will claim us all unless she's put back to sea."
Is that really your first instinct when you understand there's a mermaid among you, that we have to put her back? Most of their tales of mermaid, it's like people are like, ooh, interesting. This is unique. We should keep them on land, or like trap them to be my wife or something. Like, I don't think I recall any previous ones. They're like, no, put it back. Put it back.
You know, my first thought.
Oh no, what?
I was like, yeah, because those are white people's stories. It's like, oh, this is interesting. Let's put it in a museum. AKA all of Egypt.
Oh gosh. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but I'm just like, okay, maybe the rest of the world doesn't have colonizer things, specifically because these are slave stories. Like, they came from the slaves, so obviously they wouldn't highlight captivity of a creature against its will.
Oh gosh, you're right. Yikes.
That was my first thought. Well, I mean, I just, like, for argument's sake, I do think it is an interesting point to bring up that in most other stories we've read where there's mermaids or there's any magical creature, usually they get caught and captured and used or put on display, or their power is abused in some way by the wielder. And I do think it's important to highlight that this is an African-American story. So it's not going to have the same beats or the same rhythm as a European one, because that's not where it originated. And so I think it's always important to realize where our stories come from. And these stories come from all over. So it comes down to where they're located, what influenced them. And there are lots of cultures where if you see something magical or something spiritual, it should go back to where it belongs. Yeah. Just like you would say, you know, this creature belongs to the skies, this creature belongs to the ocean. And magical creatures specifically, if you see them as belonging somewhere, I think this is another clear thing. If they're taken away from somewhere by force, then obviously their home or wherever it is they came from and the people they came from, they might react quite violently or negatively to having something snatched away from them. Whereas when we see the classic tale of something like The Little Mermaid, where she chooses to leave, we don't really see any kind of natural forces reacting in the same way because it was her choice. And then, of course, when she tries to go back, she is rejected and she is turned into sea foam as punishment. But I think the optics of it depend on which storytelling tradition you're coming from. And specifically here, I think it's, you know, the conclusion is if the sea and the water is unhappy, then the logical thing to do is to appease it. And how do we appease it? Well, if we've taken something from it, we should give something back. And in this case, if they don't give back the mermaid, they will give their lives.
Yeah. I do appreciate just like the shakeup from the formula, because I think when I like first read this, I was really anticipating that to continue, because that's just most of the stories I've heard, right? So I actually just really appreciate this immediate different gut reaction of, okay, no, this thing needs to go back where it came from.
Honestly, when I read, because I read I read a couple books actually to pick which one I wanted to use, and there were a lot of contenders. But I remember seeing Virginia Hamilton's Her Stories. This is the collection where the story comes from. And I read through a couple of them, and this wasn't the original one I chose. The original one I chose was called, I think, Annie Christmas. And I ended up reading a whole bunch of the different tales, and they are very unexpected, which I appreciate. And all of them had a little note at the end about where the sources were from and some kind of like allusion to where the tradition comes from or where the stories come from. And so for anyone looking for just fascinating stories that don't follow kind of just what we expect from the traditional European stories, it's not, a surprise that we're used to them because it is Western media that we all usually consume. But one thing we love to do on the podcast, obviously, is to share a wide range of stories and expose people to stories they probably wouldn't have seen naturally. And so if you are looking for those kind of stories, I do recommend Virginia Hamilton's Her Stories. Just fantastic, funny. There's folk tales, there's fairy tales, there's some true tales in there. So definitely go read that as well.
Beautiful. All right, so what happens next?
So that was the story they all believed. Miserable as they were in their endless plight, they felt that if nothing happened soon to free them, they would all be drowned. And it was no surprise to anyone who to accuse as having been the one to steal the mermaid. It was obviously the doctor. Everyone knew him, but everyone stayed away from him because he was a doctor of dead things. Now, we just had another pause, but you may think, what is the dead thing? Why would dead things need a doctor? So to actually understand this, we do need to pause this book and open up another. In the original collection written by John Bennett, the doctor was called Dr. Trot. And there are stories about a potential real Dr. Trot that may have actually come from, John Bennett's collection. But there's an entire story of how he created a mermaid hoax to try and win over black customers from the Gulab root doctor. However, his plan backfired when a storm came through Charleston and a mob accused him of being the cause and of returning the mermaid, but they could never find it. But that was in Bennett's version. In Hamilton's version, she chose to make her doctor nameless and simply refer to him as the Doctor of Dead Things. As it happens, Bennett also collected a different tale called The Doctor of the Dead, and it was about Dr. Henrik Ringo. And at first, Henrik was a fantastic doctor and surgeon, but he started to become really preoccupied with death and how to comfort those in a miserable grave. And as, most people do when they start to obsess over death, they start to obsess over how to bring people back. And in Ringo's case specifically, he met a dead, ghostly woman named Helen, and he tried to bring her back. And obviously it failed. These stories, they always end up failing. And he became obsessed with, experimenting and trying to bring things to life. And that's kind of his story. So Hamilton's kind of taken these two tales and mixed them a bit. Maybe as, a tribute to the original story, which is one of the ones that John Bennett is well known for. But that's just what it is. So obviously, people are not going to look too kindly on someone who is messing with the dead and messing with the soul and messing with the process of life and death. And I think that kind of sets the stage of what kind of man would steal a mermaid from the ocean and cause all this havoc.
I always find doctors in stories like this to be eerie because doctors are supposed to be relying on science, and science is obviously evolving and changing all the time as we learn and discover new things. So whenever they pop up in stuff like folklore or even fantasy stuff, it's it feels always unnerving because either their level of science is not to where it is today, or it's limited to the day, but it's also added in with things that I don't understand, so it always feels unnerving. I never know if I should trust any doctors because they're supposed to be one of the smartest people in the room, but they can so easily slip into this creepy doctor of death shenanigans.
I feel like in any kind of like fairy tale or folk tale, whenever we see like a doctor character, it's always just a little bit unnerving in the sense of what is your role? Are you here to actually, help them, or are you going to do something sinister? And in this case, it is, they say they're very clear. He's a very sinister doctor of dead things. You can't make it more clear.
It's true. I will say the one exception to that rule is if the doctor is the main character who's fallen into the other world or is, the original like point of view character who usually is also confused by it, then those doctors you can usually trust at least because you understand their level of understanding of what's going on. But yeah, they're always an interesting character to have in the mix here. So, but I'm glad it's just straight up. We know this is a sinister doctor. We know where he stands.
Yeah, and at least the people know, this is the one who took the mermaid. They didn't have to go around looking. And this was specifically also helped because his assistant, Asa, told them all of the otherworldly things the doctor kept hidden in his basement. Some of them were half alive, and amongst them, the assistant did claim that the doctor kept a mermaid. And specifically, he said, on the topmost shelf in a bell jar, there was a gorgeous Mer-Woman who had been shrunken down. The people crowd around Asa and asked if she was all right. After all, they did not want her to suffer and die. Sadly, Asa told them that she was covered in green water and her long stringy hair just floated around her miserably. She spent her days banging her little fists against the side of the jar as a goldfish swam around and around her. Now, this story, or, this true tale, was so believable that everyone instantly thought, yep, this is it, but no one knew what to do. Until one day, it seemed as if everyone got angry all at once. They were tired of it all, of rainwater emptying down their windows and fireplaces, of sitting in their chairs with water up to their knees, and so finally they raged, and from their rage came a great mob that waded to the doctor's shop. They picked up muck from the streets and threw it at the windows. They shouted and screamed, and finally the doctor came out. "There's no such thing," he cried. "There is no mermaid here or anywhere." "You lie," one tall black man shouted. The crowd cried, "Bring us the mermaid. Let her out." The doctor denied it all, but a very small, very brave man swam down to the basement window. He was gone a long time, and then came the sound of something breaking. Next, putrid, slithering things swam out of the house, and the slime coated the waters where the people stood. The small man reappeared and cried breathlessly that he had seen her. She was a beautiful, pitiful thing, and she was indeed in the doctor's house.
At least the trope of the mermaid being very beautiful remains intact for this tale.
You always need a beautiful mermaid. This was all some of the men of the town needed to get together and break down the door. They searched the shop, upstairs and downstairs, and they found lots of hidden places filled with horrible half-living things, but they did not find any mermaids. A tall white man said to them, "If you don't leave at once, we'll call out for the army to make you leave." And he spoke to them that way, to the people who had lived in the city all their lives. In the end, the Mer-Woman was never found. Some of the people wanted to speak to the tiny mermaid, to hold her in their palms and to see her. Maybe if the men had just reached up to the top shelf, in the shadows behind jars of things in the doctor's back room, they would have seen the mermaid swimming in her little jar. She'd shrunk down to the size of a baby frog and had become so shriveled that no one would recognize her. However, the rains did soon stop. Perhaps the bell jar was now big enough to suit the tiny mermaid, or perhaps the doctor was so frightened by what he had done, they had tossed her out the back where she floated down the flooded steps back to her home. The people knew she caused the rains, but they didn't blame her. They blamed the doctor, but what had been was gone once the rain ended. For weeks, the people washed down the walls and scrubbed and swept out their streets. They tried hard to get rid of the fishy odors, but sometimes on a particularly hot day, you can still smell them. The doctor also closed down his shop and moved away. Maybe he died, but no one could say. Still, we all know that men live and then they die all the time, and maybe merwomen and mermaids do as well. And that is how the story ends.
I really like that they didn't blame the mermaid. They blamed the doctor because it's like, it's true. The doctor was the source of like what caused it, but I find it's really easy in these tales to just blame the supernatural creature. It's like, how dare you be kidnapped?
And also more specifically, I think oftentimes it's very easy in these stories to blame the woman. and to see the female character as somehow causing the demise, as somehow, being part of the reason why something's gone wrong, because either she's done something or she's a witch. So, having a witch hunt to go after a woman is not an unknown thing. And specifically, I guess, going after Black women as well, as being the lowest on the rung, to be the easiest to blame, to be the one to take the flack for it. And so the fact that, no one blamed the mermaid and no one had a witch hunt, to go get her and kill her. It was more so to go get her and free her. I really liked how that was the message of the story here, is that while they knew that she was to blame, they didn't blame her for her own captivity, because she didn't choose to be captive and be put in someone's jar.
Yeah. Quite a different take on it, and especially just the whole mermaid idea, and I quite like it.
I know. I feel like every time we read one of the mermaid stories, they're always different from each other. Like specifically as well with the Selkie story, there are many versions where, she kills her own kids, or, ones where she runs away with them and she looks at the guy when she's running away and she goes, you were great, but I'm going back to my real husband now. So that one, the Selkie stories sometimes have a really nice comedic edge to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's obviously some of the native ones where it's a little bit more sinister, where they drag you down. So it's always interesting to see where a mermaid story is going to go, because I feel like they never go where you think they are. And they're never the Little Mermaid-esque. Even the Little Mermaid, the original Little Mermaid, was not Little Mermaid-esque, where it's like the Disney-fied version.
Yeah, Disney had created a different vibe of the Little Mermaid, and I feel like that has kind of defined mermaid stories, just in terms of general pop culture knowledge. But we just keep finding more and more that are just not like that. Like, for better or for worse. Like, I like the original Disney Mermaid, but I like all these other takes on these stories. There's so many different points of view on them, and so many intriguing different ways of going about it. Yeah, I quite love them. And so I was happy to see another one swim up to our podcast.
And then we also have, the sirens, and they're seen as the cause of sailors jumping into the water and drowning. But, sirens were like bird women at first in the Odyssey, so let's not even go there with them. But one thing you will notice about the story is we had a very specific time. Like, it was it was 10 o'clock when this happened. And, the approximate location of this tale is the coastal area around Charleston in South Carolina. So it's a very specific tale, and I think that adds some legitimacy to the story when you hear a specific time period and a specific, something must have happened around this time for people to start creating stories around it. And, specifically Black seagoing families had to deal with lots of wild weather and strange debris, and all of it washed onto shore, and they had to figure out, what does it mean? What are the messages? Or, why is this happening? And I think traditionally people think there aren't a lot of Black mermaids, and there aren't a lot of mermaid stories outside of Europe. But there are tons of different mermaid stories from all over the world, first of all. But just in this collection, Virginia Hamilton highlights 2 different mermaid stories, probably originating from the mixed race communities of the Cape Verde Islands off of the African coast. You have Black Portuguese seafarers, as well as, taking elements of traditional African tales. And I will say the other story in this collection is very tragic, and it suddenly, it ends very abruptly, and it's called Mary Belle and the Mermaid. And it's actually quite a sad story. It's along the same lines I found as the Chinese Cinderella story, where she has the fish, the magic fish that helps her and gives her food and, gives her wisdom. And so it's always interesting to see when you read these stories where your mind goes of what you can connect it to. But That's another great story to read. Just be prepared. It is, again, unusual to what you're expecting. So always, when you read stories like this, always read the notes, look at the introduction, so you can get some context before you start reading of why a story is shaped the way it is. And again, all of these will be linked on our website with the show notes.
So thanks so much for sharing that, Fox. I think that was a very good story, and I'm very interested in these other stories you mentioned, kind of similar takes on them. I don't know when the next mermaid story will come our way, but I'm sure it will be sooner than we think, because we just keep finding more of them.
If anyone is still looking for any mermaid stories, obviously check out Virginia Hamilton's book, but also if you go to our Twitter/X, @FromEnchanted, we have just posted up a list of some modern retellings that are very focused on specifically African American fairy tales or taken from African stories. And there are some really good modern retellings, and not just retellings, there are some young adult contemporary stories that still use the supernatural elements, but they bring it to modern day America. And I really like stories that do that, specifically for young adults, because I feel like it makes it with relatable characters that you can actually relate to. Mm-hmm. For those of people who don't like fantasy stories or who don't like historical fiction, it makes it so that you can still enjoy the tale and the influences without having to read a genre you might not like. But yes, do go check those out. There's a post on there as well. Well, that's all for today, dear travelers. But if you do want to hear more from us and find out what our next tale will be, you can join us on any social media account. We are on Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, Bluesky, Mastodon, and literally anywhere where you have a social media account, you will probably be able to find us at Tales from the Enchanted Forest or at From Enchanted. However, if you are old school like Sparrow, you can email us at talesfromenchantedforest@gmail.com. And as always, the best place to find us is always on our website with the same name as our podcast. We'd love to hear your questions, comments, and suggestions, so if you have anything to share, please don't hesitate.
And remember, there's always a place for you in the Enchanted Forest.